Welcome to the Real Estate Show with your real estate and mortgaging team, Terry Kilakos and Merav Marciano on CJAD 800.
And happy Sunday afternoon, everyone. The time is 1:06. The sun is shining, and we are at the base of the Jacques Cartier. I was about to say Champlain Bridge. Jacques Cartier Bridge. I don't know. You know, for those of you who know me, you know that I fly, and every so often I would get the tower. They would say to me, across where the Mercier is. And I would be like, where's the Mercier? Anyways, good afternoon. You're listening to The Real Estate Show. I'm your host, Terry Kilakos, chartered in real estate and mortgage broker, as well as president and founder of Northeast Real Estate and Mortgage Agency. And today we're talking about whether it is better to buy and hold or sell your investment property. Joining me, we have my co-host, Merav Marciano, chartered real estate and mortgage broker and vice president of Northeast. We've taken a couple of months off during the winter, and that's it. Merav, the whole industry has turned upside down on its head.
It's been crazy.
I know. It was a crazy end to the year, and it was a crazy start to the year, as we're going to see during our market update. You can join the conversation by calling in with your questions at 514-790-0800 or texting in to 514-800. You can also watch us and comment on Facebook Live, facebook.com/Northeast Mortgages. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is newsonthego.ca. So before we kick off the show, and this is for those of you who don't know, Merav is my business partner for the last probably a dozen years, right? 12 years or so. And besides that, she's also my beautiful wife. And she said to me, she's like, you can't say that I'm your wife. And I'm like, she's my beautiful wife. She is. And we constantly at the house have these not arguments, but these discussions, if you will, about whether, we should be selling our investment properties and, buying other ones and doing stuff like that. And I figured, what better way to kick off the year than to bring all of the CJAD listeners into our conversations to see, because truth be told, Merav, I talk with my clients all the time, and it's a common discussion that's going on, right? It's something that comes up all the time, and I end up having the wife is telling me one thing and the husband is telling me something else, and sometimes I'll agree with the wife, and I get the husband kind of looking at me shaking his head, and sometimes I'm going to agree with the husband, and I end up getting it the other way around. I personally like having the wives agreeing with me, because
that's always the best way to go. Exactly,
because they're the ones that control everything. What was that in My Big Fat Greek Wedding? What did they say? The
man is the head and the woman is the neck.
Who controls the head? So. Okay, so before we kick off the show, let's look at a little bit of a market update. Okay, so today the big news, the big news last week was that as of April 6th, so in a little over a month and a bit, we're going to see a minor modification to the mortgage stress test for insured mortgages. But between us, I don't think it's a large enough change that they're doing. It's going to give people about 2% more buying power over, when you're looking at a $400,000 mortgage, they're going to be able to qualify for maybe a $408,000 mortgage. And effectively what they're doing is, for those of you that have listened to the show long enough, you know that the way that the mortgage stress test was designed, we would be basing the actual qualifying rate on whatever the actual posted rate of the Bank of Canada was. Well, now what they're going to be doing, they're going to be looking at the contract rate, and they're going to add 2% to that. And at this point in time, it's actually more advantageous to do it like that than to go with the actual Bank of Canada rate. But I've actually seen that calculation go the opposite way, where it was higher. So that's that. We're also... Big
and
news.
Also, sorry, but in April, we don't know where the rates are going to be.
Exactly.
So it might not even be to our advantage, no?
100%. So we might end up seeing, right now the 5-year fixed rates are actually pretty low, But in April or May, we might end up seeing them hovering in the 3% range, like they did in the tail end of last year. And at that point, it's actually going to be more advantageous to go with the Bank of Canada rate as opposed to what the government is putting in place now. As you guys have heard me kind of rant and complain about this in the past, where I've said, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And the government went in and they tried to fix something that wasn't broken. But we're not going to get into that. The next thing, we talked about this last year as well, the first time home buyers incentive program, which was basically you would be receiving 5% of whatever your purchase price was so that you can actually use it towards a down payment. Well, it was a complete flop. So there was only 55 million funded out of the 1.25 billion that the government had earmarked. And I remember being at a conference and one of the speakers said, by the way, has any mortgage broker here done one of these programs? And there was like one hand that went up in a room of 600 people. So that was a big flop. And the other thing, 2019 was a year where real estate in Montreal was on fire, and 2020 is gearing up to be just as hot. What did you saw the stats this week? What do they look like?
First of all, it's been crazy out there. Every single property that we see, it's multiple listings, it's multiple offers. We see a lot of action out there. 2019, we saw an increase in 4% of the amount of sales that happened in Montreal. But the interesting thing is that single-family homes actually dropped by 1%, but it's condos that went up by 5%. So we see a lot of activity on the condo side. Number of listings went down actually by 3% in total in 2019. And number of condos went down by 24%. So that was quite interesting. And as you know, a lot of condos are new construction, so they don't actually get listed.
Exactly.
But what we saw also is that there was 17% less active listings. So although there was not a lot of new listings, there was even less active listings, basically listings out there that were already existing. And that's scary because basically the less we see
inventory.
less inventory, which means more demand for existing properties out there on the market. And the volume of the amount of the actual sales went up by 11%. So we saw it go up to $9.7 billion, the volume of the transactions.
Wow, that's crazy.
So that was, and they're saying that 2020 is going to be just as crazy, if not crazier.
Yeah, and I mean, we see it even with our numbers. I mean, at the beginning of this year, we had our kickoff, and, Northeast Mortgages, we always kind of track what we're doing. And at the beginning of last year, in January, which typically ends up being the quietest month, we had a month that was hovering around, about 10 million in transactions in business. And then all of a sudden, this year, it was 27 million, almost $28 million in business in what's supposed to be the quietest month of the year. So if that's an indicator of what's going to happen towards, kind of going into the rest of the year, I'm looking forward to it. And the big news, which a lot of people heard, was that Northeast Realties and Northeast Mortgages actually merged to form Northeast, simply Northeast. So it's Northeast Real Estate and Mortgage Agency, and that was done at the beginning of this year. It was a merger that we had been talking about for a while, and now it actually happened, and we're actually very happy. The brokers are happy, and the clients are happy because it has eliminated this redundancy. We've got some texts coming in as well. Coming up, we're going to be looking at the different ways to make money in real estate. Now we're going to take a small detour over to the CJAD Traffic Center with Kira Yeager.
You're listening to The Real Estate Show with your real estate and mortgaging team, Terry Kilakos and Merav Marciano on CJAD 800.
You're listening to The Real Estate Show, and today we are looking at whether or not you should be selling your home, in other words, not home necessarily, but your investment property, or holding on to it. Feel free to call in with your questions at 514-790-0800 or text into 514-800 in order to join the conversation, just like Sharon and Frank did here. I'll read Sharon's quick because I like this. Happy to see you guys back on the air. Love the show. From Sharon. And we have another text here from Frank in LaSalle. By the way, thank you very much, Sharon. Over the last couple of months, we've had about, 2 or 3 dozen people kind of reaching out to us at the office saying, when are you guys getting back on the air? And here we are, we're back on the air.
Ta-da!
Exactly. I tend to hibernate in the wintertime. So, okay, so Frank from LaSalle has a question. And he's asking, hello, Terry. At this time, I'm 64 years old, not yet retired, but looking at life as a near retirement, possibly will be on a plan in 2 years. I have to make a decision on what I will do. Revenue property is always a good idea in terms of money, but I hate tenants. I have another issue. I own a triplex and a revenue property duplex, all paid up. Is it best to sell in the market and go condo? What do you do? Frank from LaSalle.
Oh my
so
goodness.
This is like the perfect question for this show, because it lines up exactly with conversations that me and my beautiful wife have had. Okay. She's blushing now, people. Okay. So, I'm the type of person, I'm a hoarder of real estate. I own the first fourplex that I bought when I was 24 years old, which was in Hochelaga Maisonneuve. I still have it. And that property, over the years, I've, leveraged it. I've used it to buy other properties. And it still provides me positive cash flow, and it's great. Now, what was you had an opinion on this too a couple of years ago, Merav.
Well, I get his pain about the tenants. I get it. It's tough. It's as a real estate investor, having tenants is not easy, and tenants do have a lot of rights in Quebec, and as they should. But I mean, it's hard for landlords because you can't increase rents properly. You have tenants causing damage, which can ultimately cost you money. So it is difficult, and I do feel his pain, and I do feel that sometimes we say, that's it, I'm fed up, I want to just get rid of it. So, and I've been through it, as you know, where I wanted to sell, and thankfully you've convinced me not to, but there are solutions around that. And one of the solutions that Terry and I came up with is hire a property manager.
Absolutely.
Let him deal with the headaches. And yes, we are still involved, but the main headaches are handled by him, and we pay someone to handle that.
Yeah, I'm of the opinion that there's no such thing as bad tenants. There's only bad landlords. And I'll explain to you what I mean by that. The more, at the risk of sounding I don't know, someone's going to get offended. If someone ultimately always ends up getting offended, I always get an email saying that I shouldn't have said something. So I'm just going to say it anyways. The thing is that as a landlord, you need to have control of your tenant. Okay. You need to have control of the environment that your tenant's in. And that means that, if your tenant is a little bit late, even if it's 1 or 2 days, you have to issue a letter, right? You got to make sure that your tenants know that you mean business. I, as a landlord, a few years back, before I had property managers, I didn't have time to be that landlord, right? I wasn't tough enough for it because I had other businesses to run. I had other things to do. So I end up hiring a property manager who ends up taking everything from A to Z, to the point that I have not gone to any one of my properties in years. Real estate is a fantastic investment, okay? Especially when you're looking to create passive revenues in your retirement. It's excellent. So in the case of Frank, what I would probably look at doing, he mentions that his properties are paid off. I would probably look at maybe going in, remortgaging a couple of them as opposed to selling. Then we go in, once we've remortgaged the properties, we're able to go off and buy other properties with them and create a passive revenue stream that's going to complement his retirement over years to come.
Yes, and that's where I had my aha moment,
Yeah.
is the refinancing in order to buy other ones. That's when I said, oh, wait a minute, maybe Terry's onto something here.
Yeah.
Don't sell, refinance, buy another one. Let it appreciate, refinance, buy another one. And that's when I was like, wait a minute.
There's
maybe
something here.
selling, getting rid of the goose might not be such a good idea.
Yeah, which was the common thing that we used to talk about, right? So Merav would be like, "Let's sell the properties," and I'd be like, "No, we can't. We can't kill our golden goose. They're laying eggs for us every single month that are golden." And she was like, I'm done with the tenants. I can't deal with this anymore, So it was a constant kind of back and forth that we were having in our household, but eventually the property manager ended up doing their thing. Frank just has a little bit of a follow-up here. Thanks, Terry, and I appreciate your wife's aspect to solving the headaches. I'm ready for a manager, and I agree I made a mistake renting, not taking all the proper info, and now I know. Great show. And we have another text here from Dominic in Laval who's asking, hello, can you discuss vice cachet, and can a seller ever be non-liable, and what if he skips town? That's a great question. So if you're buying a property and the property is bought without legal warranty, well, you're buying it at the risk and peril, if you will, of yourself. So if you're buying a property that has it's not coming with a legal warranty, then you theoretically cannot go back to someone that sold their property. Okay. Now, that's not to say you can't go after them for fraud. So if they have purposely done something to defraud you, then you actually can go back to them, even if you bought the property without legal warranty. If the person skips town, well, it's up to you to actually find them. There is people that are in the industry, skip tracers, that will locate them, and it costs money, and sometimes you got to weigh out the pros and the cons, whether or not you're going to be willing to spend the money to track someone down versus what you're actually going to get. A lot of times as homeowners, we get a little bit bent out of shape, and I'm the type of person where when I buy something, I've inspected it, I've done my due diligence on it, and short of me finding something that was really nasty in the property that the previous person hid from me, I'm not going after them. I'm not going to go after someone for $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 in damages, and it's going to cost me X amount in legal fees, and it's going to cost me X amount of this and X amount of that. So, you got to kind of look at it and remember you're buying used properties. Do you agree?
And I think that you also have to prove that it was intentionally hidden, that defect, because it's hard to just say, hey, this person knew about this. You can't just accuse someone without knowing.
Exactly. Up next, we're going to be looking at some of the reasons why you may want to sell your real estate. You're listening to The Real Estate Show on CJAD 800.
The Real Estate Show is brought to you by Northeast Mortgages.
Thank you for joining us on The Real Estate Show. Today, we're talking about holding on to your real estate versus selling it. We'd love to hear what our listeners have to say about the subject. You can call in at 514-790-0800 or text in at 514-800 to let us know your thoughts on this matter, just like we have Lauren and Emily and a whole bunch of people here that sent us a bunch of messages. This one, you're going to love it. Merav, this says, between the both of you, your wife sounds like the calm voice of reason. Welcome back from Emily.
I like you, Emily.
My wife is the calm voice of reason unless she's yelling at me, and then she's not really calm at all.
It's only if you deserve it.
This question, both Frank and Lorna actually have a very similar question. Hello, good show. What is a property manager paid on 1, 2, or 3 duplexes? Thank you, Lorna. So Lorna, Lorna and Frank, because Frank basically is asking the same question. For me, I will pay my property manager about 10% of the rents that I'm collecting. Okay, Merav kind of mentioned that it's closer to 10 to 15%. I've seen property managers go as low as 7%. Now, you have to remember something. You get what you pay for, right? So what are you getting for that 7, 10, or 15%? So if they're going to be cleaning the property, they're going to be getting it ready for you to rent it out after, they're doing a whole bunch of stuff for you, well, that's, you're going to pay more. So for example, the property manager that I have, I mean, somebody calls because the toilet's clogged, he's going to go and unclog it. And not only is he going to unclog it, but I don't pay anything for that. It's included in his property management fees that he's collecting on a monthly basis. So these are all kind of little things that you need to factor in when you're looking to hire a property manager. That's my that's kind of my 2 cents. And at the end of the
day, like I always say, that even if, because a lot of people might look at it and say 10%, that sounds like a lot. But at the end of the day, if you're going to end up losing 1 month of rent that year because you didn't manage the property properly, or you didn't rent it out quickly enough, then you just made back, you know what I mean? Like you just lost that 10% anyways by not renting it out for 1 month. You know what I mean? So
absolutely.
At the end of the day, you have to look at the pros and cons, and that 10 or 12% buys you peace.
Yeah. Agreed. 1,000% I agree. We have another text here from Louise who's asking, "Hi Terry, great show. What's the difference between remortgaging my house to reinvest in a rental property versus using my HELOC?" Thanks, Louise from Kirkland. So, I mean, you could use a HELOC to buy an investment property. So, use the HELOC for the down payment. No problem. You can also remortgage your property and use the money that you get out of remortgaging towards buying that rental property. The thing that you have to remember, and I've always, I always stress this, a HELOC is a tool, okay? And unfortunately, the banking system has made us believe that it's the way to get money out of your house. It is not the only way. When you have a HELOC, what ends up happening is, number one, it's compounding monthly. Number two, you're paying a much higher rate for that versus if you were to remortgage your house and, just use that money. The other thing, the credit reporting agencies, another Equifax, TransUnion, Experian, all of them, when they look at HELOCs, they don't see it as a home equity line of credit. They look at it as a personal line of credit. And what ends up happening is, let's say you have a $100,000 HELOC, and then all of a sudden it becomes maxed out when you use it. Well, guess what? That's going to impact your credit bureau. So the sweet spot in using money from a HELOC is about 45%. Don't exceed that because it ends up causing you issues. We also have a call here from Terry in Montreal. Buy beat up property to reno or new. Hey, Terry.
Terry, well, just like you mentioned, let's say I'm looking into buying a real estate property for an investment.
Yeah.
Do I buy something that's run down a little bit at a cheaper price and renovate myself, or get a company, or do I buy something that's already ready to go? And the same thing would apply to my property if I'm selling something that I have.
Mm-hmm.
Do I sell it as is right now, a little run down, or should I renovate and ask for a higher price?
So
I'll take your answer off air. Thank you, Terry.
All right, thanks, Terry. Okay, so basically, think about this. Okay, if you're planning on selling a property, right? You have a home, it's worth X amount of dollars as is. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, if you're going to put in some renovations into that property, it's going to raise the value. But there are certain renovations that increase the value of your home.
Yeah.
And there's other renovations that support the value of your house. So, for example, a roof will support the value of your house. It's not going to necessarily increase it. Maybe if you're putting a Tesla roof on, but something like that. But for the most part, it doesn't. Okay. But if you had a really bad roof on your property, it would actually lower the value of your house. So you have to be careful. The other thing is, just because you have a specific taste, it doesn't mean that everyone has the same taste as you. So to you, the greatest thing since sliced bread might be lime green walls. To someone else, they might see that and be like, this is completely disgusting. So a good real estate broker, and this is part of the work that we do at Northeast, we will send you one of our realtors. So we have people that come in and they say to us all the time, I want to remortgage, I want to get a HELOC, I want to do this, I want to do that because I want to do renovations. My plan is to sell it, right? And sometimes I tell them, whoa, stop. Don't get ahead of yourself. Let's find out what the value of your property would be as is before you go off and spend money on renovations and this and that. And then tell the real estate broker what your plans are. And then what is going to be and then they'll tell you exactly what your value of your property is going to be once the renos have been done. And our clients love that. This is, I think it's a service that's not offered by anyone else. Yeah.
And we've seen the values go up just by some basic things like a fresh coat of white paint, some curb appeal,
absolutely,
landscaping, cleanup, decluttering. Yep. Sometimes that alone can give the buyers a good vision of what their renovations are going to look like. And you don't have to spend months in renovations and thousands of dollars, which you might not recoup.
Yeah. And we've seen it where there was that property. It was a condo. Remember that condo where the person said, I'm going to renovate it before they sell it? Mm-hmm. I'm trying to remember where it was. But anyways, this was a number of years ago. And the previous owner went in, did a whole bunch of renovations.
I remember that.
They spent like $30,000, right? If I remember correctly. And then the new tenants went in and they the new owners went in and they had to gut the whole place because it was absolutely disgusting, right?
I do recall that.
So you have to be careful with what you're actually been doing. Here's another text from St. Jerome. My husband and I have been with Terry and Merav for years, and we couldn't go anywhere else. Many thanks. They make you feel like family. Hugs, Carol and Steve. Carol, Steve, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, that means the world to me. You know, it's kind of like a common question that people have, and that I'm wondering actually if he was a Lefteri or Terry, anyways, whatever. That texter that he sent us. It's a common question that people have, and the other thing is when they want to buy an investment property, which was the other part of his question, do I buy one that's actually been fixed up and then I buy it and I
personally prefer to take something that's a little run down a little bit, not to the point of like a disaster, because you can actually invest into it and there's potential for growth. If something is already luxurious, chances are you're going to pay a premium on it.
Absolutely. And in real estate, especially when we're talking about rental properties, paying a premium on that real estate ends up costing you more money, of course, on your down payment, which means that that's ultimately impacting your yields. And that's something that we're going to be looking at the other side of traffic. You're listening to the CJAD's Real Estate Show. Now we're off to the CJAD Traffic Center with Kira Yeager.
You're listening to The Real Estate Show with your real estate and mortgaging team, Terry Kilakos and Merav Marciano on CJAD 800.
Thanks for tuning in. Today we're looking at the pros and cons of selling real estate versus holding onto them for the long term. Let's take a quick little look here on some different metrics that are used to determine whether your real estate investment is actually sound, right? And we go through these all the time. Let's run through them, Merav.
Well, first of all, we look at the main one that we always look at is passive income or cash flow. We never go into a property that's cash flow negative.
Exactly. So you got to have some money in your pocket, people, before you're actually going into it. Next thing is passive appreciation. So how much is it actually going to go up based on the market value, right?
Yes, and this goes back to what the previous caller was asking about. And you have to buy something that's a little bit below market value so that there's room for appreciation.
Exactly. I always go by the philosophy, buy the cheapest house in the most expensive neighborhood, personally. And then you have active appreciation, right? So active appreciation would be more specifically related when you're looking at, flips, or when you're doing something along the lines of multi-units. So as you're increasing rents, and Merav is the queen of commercial of multi-units, but
I'm just a princess, not a
you can
queen.
Kind of explain that a little bit, right?
Yeah, so basically, seeing as especially in the multi-unit world, the value of properties is really based on the net operating income that property brings out of it. When you increase rents, you automatically increase the value of that property. Thereby, you can actually go back and refinance it in the future and pull out some of that equity.
Exactly.
And also you can increase the appreciation yourself by doing renovations.
Of course.
And updating the units. So there's a few ways of doing active appreciation.
And of course, obviously, there's principal recapture, which kind of you touched a little bit on it, where you're able to increase the value of the property, go in, recapture some of that principal that you've paid down on the mortgage and whatnot over the years.
Well, look, Terry, I find that you always had an interesting way of describing real estate. You always said to me, do you want to be a rancher or a dairy farmer? And I actually like the way that you explained that. Can you just go over that again?
Yeah, so I had heard it from Robert Kiyosaki, where he had talked about when you're going into real estate, you're either a dairy farmer or you're a rancher. So both a dairy farmer and a rancher, they use cattle to make money. The difference is a rancher is going to buy cattle, raise it, and slaughter it, whereas a dairy farmer is going to buy cattle, raise it, milk it for X amount of years, and then eventually slaughter it. So it's just the difference between being a buyer and flipper, if you will, or buy and hold and for the long term. We have a quick call here from Bridget in Beaconsfield, who has a question about a condo purchase. Hey, Bridget, how are you?
Afternoon, I'm fine, thank you. So my daughter put an offer on a condo in Villemar, and they had it inspected, and everything was great. Financing was good.
Okay.
And then at one point, they were shown the condo rules, bylaws, I don't know what you call them. It's a renovated building. Nobody lives there yet.
Okay.
Everybody is moving in eventually. And then they saw and were told that they're not allowed to bring their dog because it's too heavy.
Okay.
So they are devastated because they had always made it known that they do have an animal. The bylaws say not heavier than 30
pounds,
I think, yes.
Yeah.
And their dog is a bigger dog. And they spoke to some of the new condo owners, and everybody would be okay except for one.
Okay.
Now, is there anything they can do? Any suggestions? Would they be able to get their money back that they invested for the inspection? Those are my questions.
So, first question that I have for you, did they use a real estate broker or did they go? Okay. And what did the real estate broker say in all of this?
Well, he did not know about the 30-pound law either.
Okay.
I guess.
All right. So there's, kind of problem number one, right? The real estate broker is kind of at fault, okay, at the risk of pointing fingers.
But they were only shown these bylaws once all the other stuff was done. Nobody ever showed them anything.
Yeah. So part of when you're buying a condo, you have to, obviously, you got to make sure that you're doing an inspection. You got to make sure that you're able to get a mortgage. But besides that, there's also conditions within your promises to purchase that say that you need to be able to verify the bylaws of the